This section is going to cover core data. We're going to be looking at how we can use our application to persist some of our posts. So I've actually taken the liberty to go ahead and actually start to build a bit more into this project. What we should be seeing now is a separate tab on our application where we should see our saved post. Now, learning core data sounds hard, but it's really not. All we should expect is that we should be able to save one of these, and then they should automatically appear here. Now, before we even dive into our project, I want to show you another project that has core data added to it. So let's check it out. So we're going to create this new file, and let's actually put it just somewhere in here. And so what we're going to do is take a look at what is different. So notice that first, in our app delegate, there's some new code. There's some code we haven't seen before. Now it has this idea of us saving our context and then a persistent container. Now all this is doing is it's going to read this XC data model file off of our system, and it's going to try to load it. And then anytime we're finished editing, we can save our context. Our context is like a little scratch pad we're going to use. I'm actually going to copy this code over. You're not going to ever want to just totally remember this top of your head. You're going to find that just grabbing off the internet or grabbing from another project is really simple. Now the one gotcha here, actually two gotchas, is that we need the right name for our persistent container, and we also need to import core data. That's key. Now what we're going to do now is we are going to create a new data model. So we're going to go to new file, and we're going to click data model. And so we're going to call this the micro poster data model. Excellent. Now, one of the things I want you to pay attention here is that we have this concept of an entity. Let's actually just make one. I want to really point out these differences. So this entity is called saved post, and it has this idea of attributes. Now remember, our post had this idea of properties. So they're actually quite similar, or at least the general idea here. Core data in the background is doing a lot of work for us. It's actually accessing a real database on our system and actually running the calls that would actually start to save stuff to it. But we don't want to have to learn SQL or learn how tables work. We want to just be able to interact with this thing and use it. Now, the very base level, you should think of anything that is a model could potentially be an entity. The difference is that an entity can actually be persisted. Now, notice that entities have this concept called relationships, which we're going to talk about at some point. But the real kind of comparison is just that they're very similar and that one can be persisted. So let's go over to your micropost detail control. And we're going to go to where we have this save button press method. And so all I'm going to do is talk to the save button press method, and I want to grab my context, and then I want to add something to my context. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some code from switch utility. I'm going to copy paste it over here because I need access to my app delegate. I'm going to use my delegate to give me access to my context. So if we grab our app delegate, we can then grab our persistent container, and we can grab our view context. Now, once we have our context, let's look at what's going on here. Now, here's the cool part. Without us having to do anything, notice that we now have the saved post class. Now, we didn't create it, but Xcode behind the scenes did that for us. And so we can actually initialize it using our context. Now, once we have a saved post, we can actually set some stuff on it. So our saved post, we'll notice, should have some attributes. Now, did we set some attributes? We haven't yet. So let's give it an attribute. We're going to call this content, and we're going to give it a type string. Now note that there are more types than you're typically going to find in Swift. This is because these correspond to types on the database. So let's grab our post. And now if we give it a moment, it's going to change again. We should be able to set this content. And we're going to set it to self.content. Now, the next step here is we need to actually add this new post to our context. So let's insert it to our context. And now, is that the last thing we have to do? No, we still have to save. And we can actually use the save context method that we've gotten from the app delegate. That really wasn't so hard. We got access to our context. We used the built-in class to create a saved post. We set a value on it. We inserted it into the context, and then we saved. Excellent. Now let's go and actually do the opposite side. For some reason, it's telling it has no member content. Sometimes you just have to run it or clean it and it'll be fine. So notice that now it says nothing is wrong. What happened in the background is that it just regenerated this file for me. So now we have to go into our new saved post table view controller and make some changes. So let's start at the top. This should be really easy since you've used table view controls before. We're going to create a array called saved post, which is going to be an array of these saved posts. We're going to set our number of rows as being saved post.count, and we need to now go ahead and fetch these posts. So let's write a little method. We're going to call it fetch posts. And if you had to guess what's going to happen here, I'm sure you could imagine. First step, grab our app delegate. From that point, what are we going to do? Now let's pretend we don't know, right? How would we even find that bit of information? Now, of course, we can Google, or we can take some time to look and see what context has. So I just hit dot and I'm looking around. I see delete, cool, encode. Aha, I see fetch. Interesting. Now, the cool thing here is that this NS fetch request, we can actually make that really easily by grabbing our saved post and grabbing a fetch request. Isn't that awesome? And so now we can reset our saved post to our context.fetch. So we've gotten back our post from fetching it. Awesome. So let's just run this. Now the one thing we have to do here is that our context is going to tell us that we need to throw us in a do try block. It's also telling us it's ambiguous use. Now the ambiguous use error I find to be a very hard error to figure out what exactly needs to be done here, but I've actually figured it out quite a couple of times before. It doesn't have enough context to infer what the type should be. And so what I do there is I add it straight to this call. Basically, the way that the fetch request works, it needs to have an idea of exactly what kind of NS fetch result and then what kind of managed object it's going to get back. So let's throw this in our do try block. So let's try and let's catch. Now, once we've gotten our saved post, we can reload our table view. So that was super simple. Grabbed our context, gave it a fetch request, and we reloaded some data. Now, of course, don't forget to call this method. Now, one last cool bit. We need to set our cell. So our cell has this idea of a text label and can be set a title. So if we know that, we can take our saved post, we can find the right post, so let post is equal to self.savePost. We can find it by the index path.row, and once we have that, we can grab the content off of it. So let's grab the content, and once we have the content, we're able to then set our title to content. So let's run it. Oh, and one last thing we need to do. Oh, this is actually supposed to be text, and we are going to have to properly unwrap. Excellent. So now that all of this has been done, what we should find is that if we save something, it should appear on our new tab. So let's go to our new tab, nothing. Let's go to our original tab. Let's hit save. Aha! Interesting, we got an error. I love this. So let's see what our error is. So it's reason. And NS Manage must have a valid entity description. So our save post doesn't have an entity description. What do we think we're going to do here? Also, notice something here. Failed to load model name test core data. What do you guys think is going on? Let's go to our app delegate for a second. Let's scroll all the way down. And we forgot something. We need to change this back to micro poster. Let's rerun it. Let's see what happens the second time. Now look at how easy that was. We were very easy to just look at the error, and that's a good thing about Xcode and the way this language is written. So, is anything saved? Shouldn't be. Let's go, and let's hit save. Okay, and let's go here, and wait a minute. Why don't we have anything? What do we think might be amiss here? So let's investigate for a second. We're going to go to our save post controller, and what we're going to do let's print our self.savePost. Right, let's see exactly what's inside of this. Is this going to be our array? Is it going to have all the values we expect? Let's go take a look. So let's look at something. We see that there's a bit of information in here. We see that clearly there's some kind of saved post in here. So why don't we have any values? This is interesting. Now, what do we think might be happening? And one of the easiest ways I find to test stuff like this is if you can check by the count and it has a count of something, it means to tell you that it's fetching back some information, but something here isn't actually being set properly. So let's give it another run. So let's go to here. And there's supposed to be 3 of them. Okay, that's interesting. So if there are 3 of them, why aren't we getting what we expect? So a couple of things could be happening. Is our table view set properly? Well, let's double check. Let's take save post cell. One of the reasons I like doing this sort of stuff is because it really shows you how to debug and how to dive through the code to figure out what exactly you need to do. So let's grab our cell. And is it a saved post cell? So it does have the right identifier. Excellent. And so let's see now, if we go back to our save post table, can I get out the right post and the right content? So let's print and let's see what we get. So interesting. Why aren't we getting any posts? Because we should at least get a post for each cell for row I. This is super interesting. You should see some bit of boilerplate left over from when we created this file is actually returning 0. Let's actually take this out and see what we get. Because what should happen is that the default should be 1 section. Aha! So we're getting much closer. So we're finding that now we took out that bit of code that was left over from the boilerplate, and now we should only safely get the posts that have content. Oh, and we just deleted one thing we need, so let's take that back out. Excellent. Let's run this. Now, what you should have seen is like that we very easily were able to see, okay, wait a minute. We know we have posts. We know we're looking in the right area. We weren't seeing it being printed out here. And so it started to make me think, okay, well, maybe something else is not allowing it to actually show some posts. So, and there we have it. We have some of our posts. That's excellent. Let's go and save another one. Let's go back. So, something else is a little off. Did that post get saved? So what do we think? Let's go back and take a look at our fetch post. So it seems like some of our posts are not being, I know exactly what it is. So, do we think that our posts are not showing up? What do you guys think? So they actually are, but notice one of our things that should have been notifying us what's going on is this. We should be looking for count, but we only see it once. Why is that happening? Because we're throwing this in view did load. So let's do something interesting. Let's throw this in view will appear. And so what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to have it fetch our post every single time. So let's call fetch post and our view will appear. And what we should see is that it should give us our post every single time we go back to that page. So see another bit of just problem solving and thinking through, wait a minute, why am I not getting all my posts? So we come here, we see it, we go back, we see it, and see, notice 6 is coming out each time. Let's say I go and I save Vapor Rocks one more time, and go back, Vapor Rocks. Excellent. And so that concludes our talk about core data. Just to review some really, really simple things. If you remember to always grab your view context, you'll always be able to grab information out of core data and put it in. Once you're going to retrieve it, all you have to do is fetch on your context, and you can grab the fetch request off of your entity. If you want to save things, then very similarly, you have to grab your context, always grab your context, and then create an instance of your entity using that context. You can then change some of the attributes, you can insert it, and you finally need to save. Of course, the last bit, don't forget to create your XC data model. Without that, you won't be able to do anything else.